Mobile accounts for more than 50% of online gross bookings in several Asian markets. To know what lies ahead in those markets, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mike the Sheeper, Executive VP Online Travel and Managing Director, Asia Pac for Amadeus. Jay Shen, VP of Trip.com Group and Head of Investments, Ctrip.com. And Kay Shibata, Co-founder and CEO, Venture Republic Group. So welcome, the first session, panel session at Phocuswright conference this year. Like I mentioned, 50% of cross bookings in several Asian markets now coming through mobile channels. And the journey's been brands building apps, gravitating people towards them through cashbacks and rebates. How has that evolution what does that evolution mean for the market, and what do outsiders need to learn from that to begin with?
I think it's been interesting to see the evolution and then really what's been driving that change and why it's different in Asia Pacific. The biggest difference is that for a lot of people, their mobile phone has been their only and main access to the internet and to be able to start doing online transactions and bookings. And the other part is that in many of the Asian markets, there are no payment solutions to actually enable e-commerce solutions. If you look at a country like Indonesia, only 4% of the people have a credit card. Well, if you look at most of the online sites, the American side and European ones, you can't do a transaction, you can't do a booking without a credit card. So the mobile solutions that were application-based, app-based, really became of the mobile penetration and the need for different types of payment solutions. And these kind of platforms, many times payment platforms, have provided apps that worked on lower frequency and required less bandwidth in terms of 3G or 4G. And basically, therefore, it was not that people wanted to have super apps or apps. It kind of was the only way to start doing online transactions.
Got it.
For me, I think the emergence of the super apps is another opportunity for travel companies. So we can see the opportunities and find more traffic from those apps, and it will be, from now, it will be lower cost than other channels, other traditional channels. So it will be a good opportunity for them.
Okay. Okay, I mean, Japan's been way ahead of the game, specifically when it comes to mobile, and it was a different approach even back in the day. How does this evolution today stand in Japan? Is booking with apps, and particularly travel brands app, a major phenomena in that market?
So we made a big decision last year to make a partnership with Line. Right? The Line, as some people probably know, it's the biggest messaging app. But it's not just a messaging app, but it does provide many different services, including payment, including e-commerce, including fintech services, and travel, right? And when it comes to a travel service, we basically power them. So on the Line platform, we provide the meta search service, and after 18 months, so we've seen an incredible number of growth of users. So we started from a 0 followers on a Line account, and now we have 20 million. So the 20 million people, actually, we send a push notification to them to incentivize them to book the travel every single day. And then the actual transactions also happening, which is something I couldn't really kind of imagine on a day one, right? Can you imagine yourself like you book travel using messaging app, but that's really happening.
So you mentioned super apps, and as a run up to this panel, I pulled up a few slides. Can you pull up the slide? So the first one is the definition of an app, right? Very straightforward, and almost every one of us is familiar with that. Now, when he mentioned about super apps, and I did a bit of digging around, there's no such definition of super app out there. Show of hands, how many of you are aware of super apps and what it stands for? Barely anything, I would say, not even 2%.
But that's also so interesting because I think if you live in Asia Pacific,
Yeah.
you cannot imagine almost in some of the markets not being, and again, you call super apps, it's just apps that have a lot of different functionalities together.
Yeah. So that's the definition of a super app.
For me, it is. It's an app where you have multiple functionalities together. Typically, that gets facilitated and provides convenience because it has your payment information in there, and you get some rebates some of the times, and it's just convenience. It's easy accessible.
Would you like to add to that definition?
I think for me, the definition of super app is a customer base. For a super app, you have to have a huge amount of customer base. For example, for WeChat, I think they have over 800 million customer base in China. So we call it a super app.
The way I see the definition of a super apps is that a dominant mobile app platform that the people use every day for everything.
Okay.
So the frequency is definitely one key element. And then also, everything means like a diversified services, diversified portfolio is another thing.
Yeah, and that's probably where the difference is between you have super apps and you have kind of platforms.
Yeah.
And I think the super apps are the ones where it have much higher frequency.
Yeah. But
because this frequency issues are very, very, intriguing, right? Especially for the travel company.
yeah.
Because in actual travel businesses, how often the people actually consume, it's way less than ride-hailing or messaging or the food delivery. So.
And I think it's also when basically the super app is when it takes over the operating system. So it becomes the main app to use for many different functionalities.
No, so why do you think Asia became the ground zero for super apps? There are markets out there which were pretty ahead in terms of innovation on mobile. Facebook came from here. Google came from here. They could have bundled a whole string of services as well. What was it about APAC that managed to have this breakthrough?
I think for me, it's three reasons there. The first one is the population. So I think three fundamental requirements for super app. One is the population. Another is the smartphone penetration rate, and the third one is the online payment system. And in China, take China as an example. So China has 1.4 billion population in China, and the smartphone users, the number is, I think, is exceeding 700 million. So a lot of people are using smartphone in their daily lives, and we have a very mature online payment system that will help us to, if we can use super apps to do everything in China. In China, our daily life, I do not bring my wallet with me every day. I just take an iPhone, take my mobile app. It will be okay for my daily life. I can use my mobiles to have dinners and order dinners and pay everything I can do.
I wanted to add that two things. So one is, I think the super apps are tended to be born in the certain geographical markets. China is a great example. Japan is another example. South Korea, right? And then they tended to be one market which has a very strong culture, specific language, and also another point is actually, so there's also the cultural difference, in a way the people actually run the business. So this is a kind of profound question. This whole thing reminds me back in the days when I actually studied at the business school in America, in Boston. All the strategy professor kept telling me all the time that you need to focus on one business, one domain, right?
Yeah.
So that's when the capitalism actually comes in. So you built the search business and you want to stick with the search business. You don't want to diversify much.
Yeah.
But here in Asia, the family business is a great example. Conglomerate, right?
Yeah.
Samsung or any big tycoons, that they actually tended to actually diversify their businesses in one area.
Yeah.
And so there's a cultural difference in a way that the people actually run the business too.
Yeah. So they have multiple services. But I think if you look at a lot of the kind of the super apps or platforms, they've born out of a core need. So either it was payments as a core need, or a lot of them have been born out of messaging.
Yep.
And so I think they were born out of high frequency utilization, exactly what Kay says. But I think those type of communications have been kind of nascent in Asia Pacific, and then when smartphones coming in, I remember that BlackBerry users, the BBM Indonesia was the country with the highest utilization.
Yeah.
So Indonesians were messaging and having groups chats way before anybody had heard of WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's behaviors on how people indeed culturally already change and exchange information, and have started using different forms that are different in Asia Pacific because of the infrastructures, and also because of the historical way that enterprises have been set up.
So all of you represent a different component of the distribution value chain, right? What is it? Do you think travel brands can overlook participating on these mega platforms?
I would say no. No, I think, and it is a challenging situation, because I think as a travel brand, I mean B2C, we are of course, as Amadeus in the B2B side, we're the plumbers behind the scenes, and we kind of make sure that they have something to sell. But it's hard to imagine, and even as we work a lot with airlines and with other providers, these platforms, these super apps, especially in Asia Pacific, they own the front of the funnel.
Yep.
People are on it every day.
Yep.
These platforms have all the data, they know the intent, they know when they will start looking at holidays. So it's the perfect way to look at customer acquisition and seeing how you can bring people in. Now, the thing is, it won't be one platform. Different people will be in different platforms or different super apps. So you need to understand you're going to sell different things. But it's a way of doing customer acquisition that is it could be a very efficient way, and with much more data behind it, and probably more of a partnership approach than some of the other places where you can acquire customers.
But that was going to be my next question. When you talk about customer acquisition, you've got search on one side, you've got payment platforms on the other, you've got super apps, and then there are so many other platforms. How can travel companies prioritize? And what's the best advice you can give brands out there to prioritize?
First of all, this is kind of wake-up call for many travel companies, because I clearly remember like a week ago or so, both Expedia and TripAdvisor stocks actually got hit, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fact that their dependency on a Google SEO is very high. So when the algorithm changes, and then their traffic all of a sudden plummeted. And so you need to diversify the risk when it comes to their customer user acquisitions. And then the way it works on the web and the way it works on the apps are completely different, right? So that being said, I think it's in any travel company, definitely think about where they can actually partner with the super apps or some other big app tech platforms. I think this is actually becoming extremely important going forward. And this is what we exactly felt like 2 years ago. If we actually hang in there on a Google ecosystem, we're going to face a problem. So that's the reason why when we actually hear from the line guys, hey, why don't you actually partner? This is a great idea.
So Jay, from a C-Trip perspective, on one side you've got your full service OTA. How does distributing on a super app change that? Do you sell only select products, or do you have a whole gamut being
That
distributed?
depends because for some products we will sell on all channels. For example, for the hotel inventory, we will distribute our hotel inventory to different partners. Even for super apps, and but for some kind of inventory, for example, the air ticket, because we are we have huge volume in China domestic, so we do not want to distribute our air ticketing to other super apps. So that's because we acquire traffic through our own air ticketing business. We do not want our air ticketing business traffic will be diversified by the.
So you use it from an emerging channel perspective, products that are, I mean, where customers would rather just pick up those products and not your key selling products.
Yeah,
You'd still
yeah.
hold on to them.
Yeah. But you have also a differentiated approach where different brands in the portfolio
We'll
play differently on the
We'll
different
different
channels.
those, yeah.
So I think that's also what you see a lot of the players do is there's not a single approach.
Yep.
So you can continue your traditional customer acquisition, but in markets that are more mobile heavy or some of these platforms or super apps are very popular, you start using and differentiating your channels to acquire your customers. And so I don't think there's a one size fits all. You have to really understand the local market, where the customers are, what type of customers are in those platforms, and then tailor your offering.
I can add on one specific example in our case. So on a web, the way we see typically, how we actually capture the demand is actually all pull, right? Means like search engine is a great example, right? Through search engine, we are able to capture the demand very specific, right? Very targeted, right? So this is a pull marketing.
Yep.
But on an app, we typically actually generate a booking by sending a push notification to the users. So it is all push.
Yep.
So and then it's a great because if we are able to actually do the great job, we can create a new demand.
Yeah.
So on a web, it is hard because it's all pull, right? The demand is out there. Then the question is actually how you can actually get efficiently. So
But
it's a different ball games to me, to us, I think. So this is one of the good example, I think.
do you see different spending patterns in the sense of what consumer would spend on desktop browsers as opposed to in an app environment, regardless of it being a super app as well?
That's a good question.
What I get from customers is yes. So the people higher frequency, and we had a small gathering with a few customers yesterday as kind of bringing the bright minds of the online travel industry together.
At the Phocuswright conference.
Obviously. And one of our customers was saying that has something like a super app, saying that the real value is in those customers that do more than 5 purchases per week. I think per week it was.
Non-travel.
And again, these are overall purchases.
Okay.
And so they are higher spending, they are less price sensitive, and they are the ones that really spend. So even on those platforms, it's really about those higher frequency buyers. And so they can provide a better service because they come back more often. We can give them better, and not always better prices, but it's so there are definitely different types of customers also on these platforms, and you can see it because, and again, it's shopping across different categories.
Yep.
For our experience, I think the different customers, they have different behaviors on different super apps. For example, for the WeChat channel, we have a joint venture with Tencent called Tongcheng Yilong, and their volume highly depends on their traffic flow through WeChat. So, but the average daily rate, average hotel rate on that channel is quite lower than the C-Trips channel. So that depends on the different user behaviors.
Well, we actually see the completely opposite way
Ah.
because like I said, so we drive a transaction by sending a push notification, right? So in order to generate the transaction, we always try our best to incentivize the users by offering the points, the loyalty points.
Yeah.
So this loyalty points, the hook for the users to actually to book the travel. So as a result, we typically see a higher unit price, and also a lot of last minute booking, and then we probably create a new demand.
Yeah.
And also, we also see really forward-looking too. Like, for example, you already know you're going to Bahamas or somewhere, right? Must be very expensive, summer, next summer. But when we actually offer, let's say, 15% of our line points, it's a great deal. So they wanted to actually book it now for like 9 months in advance or so. So it's a very interesting, the differences in characteristics of a user's behavior.
No, but that's fascinating because on one hand, these are emerging platforms. So obviously, brands as well as these platforms would try to give incentives for customers to book on their platforms. But we're also seeing, depending on the markets, these platforms are evolving from being a marketplace, a meta search, to a merchant themselves.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because on one side, you are really being part of their pilots and feeding the beast as well.
Yeah, but we see different models. So, and I think so far what has been emerging is what works best, where there's different options. And so some of the platforms where the provider themselves, they become an OTA, but mostly basically to set the standard and to know what they're playing. You need to know kind of what you're buying in and getting merchants in. If you need to understand that business. Then you've got other OTAs coming onto the platform. You've got providers having flagship stores in those places. So you do provide a marketplace, but you also know how to run the shop. And by having your own OTA, I think it helps to be a better host. And so I think that's where we see new technologies emerging as well, providing better service solutions that the super apps not just doing payment provision, but also customer service, and also enabling technologies where they provide providers a way to kind of get direct bookings and still provide a brand experience in that same store format. So they really start running like a big department store. As you can imagine, the big Takashimaya, where you have sub-brand stores inside, but there's some brands that are in the big shop, there are some of the own brands, and that is starting to happen online as well in kind of the super app model.
No, related to that, if you see the slides up there, we've had Booking Holdings invest in Grab, Didi, Meituan, some of the emerging super apps. Is it, from a super app perspective, is it a good move to have exclusivity attached to content? Because there's also a marketplace for so many other things.
This is a $1 million debate, I think. So this is a $1 million debate, I think. So definitely pros and cons, right? But the bottom line is actually, if the users cannot actually see the benefit, they don't book. So I think if the exclusivities really works well in order to actually offer the great benefit to the users, it might work. But if they fail, I don't think it's going to work.
I agree with Ken. The travel industry is different than other industries. The people you are doing booking their travel product, they are very focused on the service quality. So if you can provide higher service quality in all kind of products, so you can do the exclusivity contract with the super apps. So
I think you need to be price competitive and there's convenience. And I think the super apps win because there's a basic threshold, like a hygiene factor in terms of being price competitive and assortment, and then it's convenience of having everything together.
Just a final question. The fact that super apps are all in one, have you deleted any of the other apps from your phone? Utilities, ride-hailing, food delivery ones?
I have.
No.
Why not?
They offload automatically.
Because I have to try many more apps.
Okay, you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike, Jay, and Kay, thank you very much.
Thank you.